Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3.
I'm going to write back to Spencer.
Vice Chair Lemus, it's 6 o'clock. You can call the meeting to order.
Okay,
Okay, I call the meeting to order for the Cotati Planning Commission for Monday, June 21st. Can we go ahead and do a roll call?
Commissioner Moore,
Here.
Commissioner Rodriguez, Commissioner Rodriguez,
I'm here.
Vice Chair Lemus.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, and is that all? Everyone else is absent.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. For the next step is we will do approval of the minutes for the minutes of May 3rd, 2021 and June 7th, 2021. Can we do them together and someone make a motion for both of them?
Yes.
Sure. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for the regular meeting of May 3rd, 2021 and June 7th, 2021. Is there any changes? Anyone want some the minutes?
This is Commissioner Rodriguez. My last name is spelled wrong throughout the paragraph. It should be a Z as in zebra, not an S as in Sam.
I do apologize, and we'll make that correction.
Awesome.
No worries, thank you.
Can we, all right, so I make a motion to approve those with the correction of Jonathan's name on everything.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Would you like me to call the roll?
Yes, please.
Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
Commissioner Rodriguez,
Yes.
Vice Chair Lemus.
Yes. Okay, so that passes. The next item is, are there any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes to the agenda this evening.
Okay, no change to the agenda. So we'll move into oral and written communications. Is this for public comment? Is there anyone here for public comment? Is that what this section is for?
Yes.
Thank you, Vice Chair Lemus. Checking in with our attendees tonight. If you use your raise hand icon on your smart device to facilitate the public comment period. Otherwise, if you're dialing in, you can dial *9, which will also raise your hand. Vice Chair Lemus, that will end public comment.
Okay, thank you. So as far as written communications, we did receive 2 written communications that everyone should have in their hands. So there was a letter and also an email that we received. Okay, so for the next one, the matters at hand that we'll be looking at, the first one is La Plaza View 3-story mixed use. Do we have a report for this one?
Thank you, Vice Chair Lemus. My name is John Paul Harries. I'm a senior planner with the City of Cotati, and I will be giving a report today. And thank you, Carrie, for changing that, because now I think you can see the title better, that we are considering, you'll be considering preliminary design review and a resolution to adopt approval of design review for La Plaza View, which is a mixed-use project which is located on East Cotati Avenue between the streets of La Plaza and Charles Street. If you go out there today, there are vacant properties, just grass and some trees. Right across, pretty much across the street, a little bit kitty corner from the fire station or the Wingman restaurant that's there. So, excuse me, next slide, please. So the plans begin on packet page 50 if you want to review the plans as we go along. But the project consists of 2 3-story mixed-use buildings. Generally commercial on the floor, on the ground floor, and then residential on the second and third floor. However, one of the buildings that we're going to talk about, building 2, also includes some residential on the ground floor. But building 1, which is the more western of the 2 buildings, would have 6,992 square feet of commercial floor area. It would have 12 residential units, 10 2-bedroom and 2 1-bedroom units, 6 on each floor. The building itself would be 35 feet high to the top of the parapet, and then there's a tower at the corner of La Plaza and East Cotati, which also forms part of the rooms. And that tower would have a 43-foot tall at its peak. Building 2, we're looking at 2 floor plans there, really. Originally, the applicant proposed a floor plan that included 1,271 square feet of commercial floor area and 17 units. We had asked them to amend it, and I'll discuss that a little bit later, so that there's 3,391 square feet of commercial floor area and 15 units. 3 of those units would be on the lower floor. They were proposing 5 units on the lower floor. And like the building number 1, the building is 35 feet in height to the top of the parapet, 43 feet to the tower. Some other project features is it includes 58 on-site parking spaces, and 18 of those are stacked. And we haven't seen a stacked parking situation in Cotati yet, but it uses a kind of an elevator system. And I put some images in the packet so you can see what that works like. But it's a kind of, cars basically either move horizontal or up and down. And you can stack cars on top of one another. These would be double stacked. There's EV chargers, 3, or there could possibly be more. Solar panels. Also, there's utilities power lines that run along this property. All of that would be underground as part of this project. The project of the 27 units, 4 of them will be built affordable units as part of the project. And another thing that we're talking about here is there's 2 driveways in and out of here, and both of those driveways we're recommending right turn only egress. Now, before we go on, actually let's just go on. Next slide, please. So some background on this property, because some of this project will look familiar to some of you. The site's been vacant since 1965. In 2009, though not related to this project specifically, but the City Council adopted the downtown specific plan in August of 2009, which established zoning and design requirements for the downtown area. And those design requirements call for 2 to 3-story mixed-use development in this area. The DSB establishes a building height limit of 35 feet. That's the maximum height, plus you're allowed to go 8 feet above that for things like towers or chimneys or architectural features. Following that, there was the general plan, which was adopted, general plan update, which was adopted in March of 2015. And the general plan within the downtown area just reiterates the DSP goals and objectives and encourages development and revitalization of the downtown area. So this project originally came to us back in 2017, and it was a 2-story project back then, which was 12 residential units. So the same kind of architectural design, 2 buildings, with again, the same kind of mission, commercial Main Street kind of look to it. But with only 6 units in each building. We took it to the design review committee for a conceptual design review on June 15th, 2017. And they commented that they liked the design because the site itself is a challenging site to develop because of the somewhat odd-shaped parcels and the way they're configured beside one another. They did ask, though, that they reduce the distance between the buildings, which they did, and minimize parking lot visibility, and allow for accommodation of outdoor dining. And they did all of that, and then ultimately they submitted a formal design review application, which came to the Planning Commission on April 6, 2020. Oddly enough, that was our very first Zoom meeting. So we were like, one of the first, because this thing had just started in March, and we, without skipping a step, had our very first Zoom meeting where the Planning Commission considered a different version of this project, a smaller project. So, and this might actually be our last pure Zoom meeting, so lucky Henry, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, at that Planning Commission, the planning meeting on April 6th, the Planning Commission did approve the 2-story design with 12 total residential units. They did, however, it was a conditional approval, and they had basically sent the applicant to work with staff to do some changes in the design, which included softening appearance and adding interest, which they did. And also to include green bike lanes and focus on or work with the city to identify crosswalk improvements at East Cotati and Charles, where the existing crosswalk is. And the city is moving aggressively in that area. Just so that you're aware, we're working currently on what's called the local roadway safety plan, and we're identifying improvements for this particular crosswalk. We're considering a couple things. At one end, at the most, I guess, heavily controlled end, is an actual traffic light that is proposed there. At the moment, though, it's not meeting the warrants to require a light. So we're looking at alternatives to help with the pedestrians. One would be like the crosswalk, like just a little bit down the street, where you press a button as a pedestrian and it turns and it lights up the crosswalk and the sign. And another system that we're looking at there is called the Hawk system, which is basically, it's a pedestrian crosswalk, but it actually has a yellow and red light and will stop traffic to allow the pedestrians to cross safely in the crosswalk. So we are still, the city is working in that direction of improving that crosswalk, and you're going to see some efforts in that very soon. And what they will be required to do, any project that's approved here, will have to contribute their TIF monies, which is the traffic impact fee, and then we would utilize those monies to put those improvements in. Next slide, please. So I'm going to try to go through these slides fairly rapidly, because also there's going to be another presentation by Henry Wicks, who's the architect on this project, and he's going to show a lot more of the architectural detail. So I'm going to touch on some of the high points, and then after he's had a chance to go, Vice Chair Lemus, I think then would be a good time for questions or to direct it at us once you've seen both presentations. But here is the site that it's located. There's actually 3 parcels there, and they would be, the project would take up all 3 parcels. Can we go back one slide? Thank you. When this project came to you in 2020, it came actually as two separate projects and had two different owners. That is no longer the case. This is a single large project. It's going to be under single ownership and management. So there's a difference there, which actually makes a difference when we actually start to calculate and look at affordable housing. Because previously, they had a requirement to provide some affordable housing, but they were not required to build it. Now the number of units that they're proposing actually generates the requirement that they actually build these units on site, and we get more when it's actually built as a big project as opposed to split into multiple projects. So that's a big difference between this project and the last project. This is a single project, just happens to be two different buildings. Okay, next slide. And next slide after that. This is the site layout. Now you can see the two buildings. Building 1 is the one we call is the one towards the west. Building 2 is the one towards the east. And the stackables kind of in between. You can see also where the stacked parking will be located here. And next slide. Here you can see the zoning. It is located within the DSP. It also has medium density residential around it, as well as downtown commercial. And next slide. The DSP, some concepts about the downtown specific plan. The plan is to remodel, re-energize existing space and create new space. These are kind of the overarching goals. And that is for the purpose of causing reinvestment in properties and generating a healthy, sustainable mixes of uses around Cotati's historic core. The DSP provides architectural and development forum rules, and I described some of the features of the DSP on packet page 22 through 28 of your printed packet. Next slide. The DSP is divided into 4 different planning areas: the historic core, La Plaza, Commerce Avenue, and the Northern Gateway. The La Plaza is pretty much that central zoning district that's within the hub. The goals of the La Plaza district are to accommodate community-wide circulation while maintaining village-scale context of the park area, to enhance public parking, enhance bike and pedestrian circulation and access, and reactivate the hub with housing and office above commercial development. It has various design standards. The maximum height is 35 feet. It has 0 setbacks, which means they want, the plan wants the development right at the sidewalk. Parking is generally two spaces per unit, which is typical. Though also there's an emphasis on shared parking, and especially with respect to mixed-use developments, where you can share some of your parking. It requires a variety of different frontages, or allows for a variety of different frontages: commercial, block, courtyards, duplex, triplexes, row houses. And actually, that shouldn't have said frontage. That should have just said the design style. And then the frontages allowed are arcade, gallery, shop front, forecourt, stoops, and porches. And I will say that this one uses a commercial block design with a shop front frontage to it. So the design and the frontage are consistent with the DSP. Next slide. So this slide tries to compare with the 2 projects. One of them was approved in 2020. And I just wanted to highlight what some of the differences are because they look pretty similar. So the first is the number of units. It was approved at 12 units. Now the proposal is 27 units. They've done that by adding the third floor primarily. The third floor, if you look down below, adds 35 feet to the building, or excuse me, adds 5 feet to the building to a maximum height of 35 feet. So the other structures that are similar to this would be village walks. The ones right there along the frontage of East Cotati are village walks next to the Chevron station on East Cotati Avenue. Those are also 35 feet, or right at 34 with some inches. As well, there's some buildings that are 3-story similar height on Santero Way. And the tower element of the Frog Song along Old Redwood Highway is at that height as well. 43 feet to the top of the tower. So that's how they did it primarily. They added that extra floor and were able to capture you know, a bunch more units. So much more efficient use of the actual space that's there. Previously, with the 2020 approval, there were no affordable units that would be built on site. They could fee out for 2 of the units. As part of this, there'd be 4 developed as part of, or 4 of them would be constructed as part of the development. In previous approval, there was no ground floor residential, so it was all commercial. And when I say commercial, largely retail, restaurant type commercial, though it could have provided for offices as well. In this particular proposal, 3 units would be 3 to 5 units would be built on the ground floor of building 2, which is the eastern building. The commercial floor area of the previous project was a little over 15,000 square feet, and that gives it a floor area ratio. When you're only looking at the building itself, the commercial floor area ratio is about 50% because half the building was commercial, the bottom floor, half of it was residential. Currently, with the floor plan that we're recommending approval of, there would be 10,383 square feet of commercial floor area, which is an FAR, which is a little bit, my first calculation had this above, but the truth is the FAR of this is about 0.23, so they're right at, real close to that 0.25, which is kind of our requirement, but still just a tad under still. Their proposal or their recommendation is to only have 8,263, which reduces the FAR down to 0.185 or 18% commercial. And just so that you're aware, the total building square footage, gross floor area, is 48,659. We already talked about the height, but the previous one was 30 feet. This would be 35 feet. The cornice towers on the previous approval went up above 10 feet above the parapet. Here they would go only 8 feet above the parapet. There's some additional windows included with those towers. The exterior, there was some discussion about this at the last meeting, especially not so much the stucco, but the tile wainscoting. They used more of a, I would describe it as more of an urban, smoother tile. The commission asked them to re-look at that material, and so now they are proposing a brick wainscoting. And the awnings are different also. Before they used the heavy cloth awnings, and now they're more structural type awnings built into the building. So that makes quite a bit of difference. In the landscaping, the last project was pretty much just consistent with the standards. This one is the same as last, plus additional planters. These are kind of right along the commercial frontage and climbing vines on various walls. The acreage and everything is the same. And next slide, please. And then just for the CEQA environmental, this is exempt. It's exempt through a series of exemptions. One, it's a project that's consistent with the general plan and an adopted community plan EIR. It's consistent with, again, the general plan. There's different ways you can, different sections that you can apply. It's consistent with those. And it also qualifies for an infill exemption, categorical exemption. So it's exempt from additional environmental review. And there has been quite a bit of examination of this property. There's very little change from what you reviewed and approved in 2020. In fact, one interesting thing is because of the reduction in commercial floor area, the traffic is actually less. Even though you're adding units, retail and commercial generates more traffic on that square footage basis than housing does. So we're actually generating less trips per day with either of the proposals today than what was approved just a year ago. So, and which is really the only major change in terms of environmental type impact. So it gets better. And next slide, please. And so our recommendation is that you move to adopt the resolution approving design review for the proposed mixed-use buildings and associated improvements at 8170 La Plaza and 120 through 128 East Cotati Avenue. And I believe that is correct when it says page 86 is where that, where that resolution begins in your packet. And then with that, I will close and turn it over to Henry and then be available for any questions or comments that you might have. Thank you. Henry, you're muted. There you are.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay, great. Good evening, Vice Chair Loomis and Commissioners Moore and Rodriguez. Pleased to see you this evening. I'm going to echo what John Paul said. It was your first Zoom meeting and hopefully the last as we recover from a very tough time that we've all experienced in Sonoma County, the nation, and the world. So looking forward to the next project that we bring before you. I can do it in person and shake hands with you and say pleased to meet you. 14 months ago, we did bring this project to you in a good form. I think it was a good project. I'll stand behind our original design and thank you for your approval at that time. But I think we're bringing an outstanding project this time around. And sometimes you learn from your experience and you learn from things that come about in your life. And sitting as a design review board member on the City of Santa Rosa Design Review Board and alternate at the county level, saw a couple of things that changed our thinking. Talked to some developers, independent people that looked at the project and said, it's great. Can you add more units to it? And my first response was, well, we tried to maximize the amount of units that we have in this project because of site constraints. It is an odd shaped site. It does, you kind of lay out the maximum amount of parking you can get and balance that with some good floor area ratios. And the best we could come up with at the time, not knowing about this stacking car system, was the project that you approved previously. Sitting on design review board, another architectural firm and colleague in Santa Rosa brought forth a project that used this innovative system. It's not cheap. It runs close to $10,000 per car, but it's a lot cheaper than trying to go subterranean. So we looked at how many more units we could add, and we added a full floor of additional residential units, housing units that brings our total from 12 up to what we're requesting of 29. And I think bringing this project forward to you with that many more units helps solve a critical problem that we're experiencing in Sonoma County, and as I experience around the rest of the country, just a housing shortage in general. So I hope you support the project as we're presenting it tonight. The lead-in slide gives you good context of the overall the overall project and of both buildings in the same shot. You can see the designated green bike lane in front of the project. We're relocating the bus stop from about where the blue car is on the right side to just to the west of building number 2, and it's in a much more urban and less, it's an understated bus stop. I'll leave it at that. Next slide, please. So this gives a little more more focused context. You can see the existing site is vacant, and north is unfortunately pointing south, which we inherited, but the right side shows it in the context of where it's located next to the fire station, the church, and a senior housing project to the east and south a little bit. Next slide, please. This shows site plan, and the footprint has not changed from what you saw before. The parking along building 1 is hidden behind it, and sits behind building 2. And the only thing that's really changed with this is the addition of a carport that has that stacking system. So we were able to add the number of required parking spaces to accommodate the additional units. And had we gone a commercial route and we wanted to make this a 3-story commercial building, we wouldn't have been able to do that. We would have either had to go subterranean or created some sort of parking garage, because commercial retail has a much higher parking ratio per square foot than residential. Next slide, please. So John Paul's pretty much covered the majority of the highlights already. Adding to some of the nuts and bolts, we're going to propose at least 25% e-charging stations, and we're allowed to do that easier because of that parking garage, which has had the ability to add those charging stations probably where they're needed most, because I think the upper level will pretty much be dedicated to the residential units. We'll have solar panel systems on that carport as well as on the roofs. As JP mentioned, we're going to do all the undergrounding for the overhead PG&E lines along our frontage and connect to properties across the street, so the overhead lines will disappear from the frontage of our project. We've got a large recycling and composting area built in that both buildings will share. We're doing on-site water retention systems that will reclaim and harvest rainwater from the roof as well as the site, and get that water percolating back into our underground reservoir system. We've designed a low water usage landscaping system, and I'll continue on with how we comply with both downtown Pacific plan and general plan requirements. Next slide, please. Project need. We believe that this better aligns with state legislative actions to increase the housing supply. Going from 12 to 27 or 29 units as we're requesting this evening makes better use of providing housing in this prime downtown location. helps meet your state mandated housing element, which I took a snip of below, which you also encourage generally removing barriers for construction of housing citywide, and that's important, and I'm glad you're doing that because other municipalities are doing the same. Not that every residential project needs to be green lighted, but it certainly, given the crisis, should move along in the process quicker than some of our other projects tend to get bogged down. It also helps meet your regional housing needs assessments, which for Cotati's 97% increase from the 2023 to 2031 projected timeframe. Next slide, please. So I gave you a comparison with those who don't remember or weren't on the Planning Commission at the time. The lower left is Building 1 as it's looking from kind of the fire station across and to the southeast, and then the proposed building above it shows the 3-story configuration. Lower right is from Charles Street to the left, looking down East Cotati to the west, and the building above it. I call this transitional style architecture, and I think the basic form is better with a podium level that is clad in brick, with the upper level having 2 levels rather than 1 level. It had some awkwardness to the design, not having multiple floors above it. I think you look at traditional architecture, you'll see what I mean, and I hope you concur that this is a better looking project. Next slide, please. So here's a big part of what we're asking for tonight is in Building 2, and what we heard when we brought it to you 14 months ago, both from a plan commissioner and from the public, was the viability of that retail space on the building number 2 and being remote-ish from the square. So we worked with staff and got a little bit of a green light without looking at the detail, and it's not fault of staff in any way. It's just we designed it in such a way that we would have 5 units on the lower level, which is shown on the right-hand side, and then got the call at a little after our application. We didn't comply with certain parts of the zoning code and a little bit of the DSP as well. So the simple solution was to remove 2 units. It got us back into that ratio of having 50% and 100% commercial fronting along East Cotati. If we added 2 units back on the right-hand side, we would still comply with the DSP of having a 50% ratio of storefront to street frontage. We wouldn't quite make the commercial, but I think this is a better solution, and 2 additional units to the housing inventory is very well worth the potential of having vacant commercial retail space on the lower level. Next slide, please. So again, kind of stating what I just said, we're proposing that we lessen the retail and commercial space by 2,120 feet, or a total of 8,263, which is about half of what was previously proposed. Housing units will add the 2 additional units, which will help meet your city mandated requirements. I rounded up a little heavier than JP did. We'll still have close to a 20% FAR versus the 25% required by zoning code. Not going to restate the 50%, we just went over in detail. The structural design would accommodate both buildings. We would build that low level as a true podium to allow maximum flexibility. So the residential walls would not, while they stack on the units above, they would not be bearing walls and could be flexible to either be retail commercial if it makes a big swing comeback, or it could be housing units as we're asking for this evening. Interestingly enough, and JP touched on with the traffic study, with housing units in this new project, even though we're going from 12 to 27 or 29, the traffic impact is less, and it kind of logically kind of correlates to the parking requirement that you're required to have on site, with two spaces basically for 1,000 square foot 2-bedroom unit versus 4 spaces if you had that 1,000 square feet of retail space. So we can have less parking or more parking voted to the viable retail commercial space that we're having if we have 2 more units and have less spaces dedicated to that commercial. Next slide, please. So getting a focused look, here's from that same vantage point pulled back, but put in the context of the existing area, and this shows what we're calling the building 1, and it's devoid of some of the lower elements that we've added, which will be in the vignettes coming up. So this is a little stark, but I wanted to show you something in context of the neighborhood. Next slide, please. But focusing in, you can see with the street trees and planters that we're planning on putting in front of the commercial/retail space, the brick siding, traditional light fixtures, a more structured awning element that's been in existence since the 1900s, early 1900s. The lower right-hand side retail storefront is very consistent with the transitional style that we believe the DSP is pointing us towards. The balcony area above creates a nice outdoor living space for the people that live in the housing units. And then the left side, you can see the tower element, and even at bird's up, it's difficult to see the top of the roof element. I should also point out that we squeezed the retail level down a little bit to gain the additional footage. We didn't only just increase the building by 5 feet, which would make for a very low third floor. We squatted the building down a little bit, and we still have generous 13, 14-foot high ceilings in the retail, but it fits the requirement. And we're able to just squeeze in and get a 3-story building in the 35-foot guidelines set by the DSP and zoning. Next slide, please. This is the Charles and East Cotati building number 2. Context of the neighborhood on a little bit of a cloudy day. Next slide, please. Again, some of the elements repeated from building 1 to building 2 to create a cohesive design connection between the 2 buildings. Along East Cotati, there is a exit stair required for egress from floors 2 and 3, and we're proposing to do a wire mesh system with a vine system on it, which adds to some greenery that softens that into the building. Next slide, please. Some of those design elements, there's a couple of examples of what the new, more urban bus stop will look like. On the plaza, building 1, we've got a blank wall and we intentionally did it that way to allow for the next building that gets developed on that site to butt up against it tightly and go 2 or 3 stories, however that gets developed in the future. But in the meantime, we would put this diagonal vine system on it We chose a copper roof for some of the few roof elements that are exposed, partly to give it a high quality and give it some longevity to it. Copper roofs, lucky to get 20 years out of it, 30 years max, and this will be a lifetime look. I know that the lower left is a similar project that was proposed for the city. I think we've even improved on this design, but I know from a staff level this is somewhat admired. Next slide. This is a recently approved project that we looked at the design review board in Santa Rosa, and it's on a prominent corner at Santa Rosa Avenue as it dives into the south side of the square. And I'm not showing this to you for certainly not for mass, because it's 7 stories and it's not relevant to its size. But what it is relevant to is the city has a similar mixed-use policy for the downtown area, having the requirement to have retail, commercial space on the ground level. This project has no retail space on the ground level. That main entry is the lobby to get into the units, and there's stoops and little entries into apartments on the ground level. The apartments on the right-hand side are accessed from the corridor within the building. Next slide, please. Historically looking back, that circa 1950s photo that we found when we had to do our historical survey of the property, I didn't see anything on the site even in the 50s, so I'm not sure when the sites have been developed, but I do know that they've been sitting there vacant for a long time, and I'm hoping this project is approved tonight and we can move forward with having that downtown, this downtown project help revitalize a little bit of that the plaza area. Next slide. This is taken from directly from the DSP on alternative reconfigurations of the square, and I never thought Santa Rosa's Conservative would be reunited, but it is, and I think that it would be quite the handsome addition and really be the cornerstone of what the DSP achieved in its 2009 study. Our building number 1 would front any of these options. Next slide, please. So taking that from that and actually the last option, this is a fully reunited square, and we did design the project on the plaza to be set back in the configuration. I had a pointer I could show you where our project is, but it's on the right-hand side of the first image, and it's got kind of almost a U shape to it. Anyway, the La Plaza would be developed as back-in parking, and in this scenario, and we've respected this potential future development and reunification of the plaza. Next slide. Again, we're in the La Plaza district, which is in the yellow, and the historic. We abut the historic, actually separated by our property of the orange or rustier color. A fairly small zone, and by comparison to a couple of the others, But a couple of the highlights that we've had to follow in our guidelines is the maximum height of 35 feet, and the equivalent floor area ratio for the district is 2.15. And we're at 1.19 for floor area ratio for our current proposal to you, and we were well under 1 before. So we're getting closer to what the LP district, I think, envisioned for floor area ratio, but due to some slight constraints, we couldn't get much higher. Next slide. These are a couple of excerpts directly from the DSP that shows examples of the shop front, and that was the style of architecture that we selected. Next slide, please. And again, the Main Street, we did a little, I think what we did was if you can see it, you squint your eyes, you can see a blending of the Main Street commercial and the Mission Revival, really anchored by our towers, both on Charles and on the corners of La Plaza, while creating a strong base. You can see in both the bottom elements that they have fairly strong bases with 2 stories of either residential or commercial above them. Next slide. Time frame. We mostly for the first application that you saw before you, we've done a lot of studies, a lot of plans, and over 4.5 years. Hopefully we'll stop at this point and respectfully request the 3-story design that you're seeing before you be approved. Next slide. So I would, pretty much the end of my presentation. I'd love to have any kind of dialogue, any kind of questions that you have. I kind of breezed through a few of the slides and be open to answering any of your questions. We'd like to respectfully request that you conditionally approve the 29, try to figure out a way for us to meet any of approval with you, and handle it at staff level, and come back to you with a different project in the future. Next slide. So again, thank you for your consideration, and from my heart, I appreciate your service and spending your evenings, in this case, before a computer screen, but hopefully you'll be back in your normal routine of seeing these in person and getting back to some normalcy in our lives. And I believe Brian Hall, one of our team members, would like to maybe add some additional comments. Can you allow him to speak, JP?
Yeah, I don't see that he's joined as an attendee. I see Brittany, Jasmine, and Judith, and unless he's using like his wife's computer or something, I don't think he's actually on. Let's see.
Well, I know for housing, and I know he was going to bolster the alt argument and confirmation that housing is a huge need here in Sonoma County, and I believe it is in Cotati as well. And we'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Wicks, for the presentation. So now I believe we go to the commissioners. Is that correct, staff? For comment?
Yes.
So
If you have
let's-
any questions ahead of your comments, now's a good time for those as well, if you need any clarity.
Okay, So do any of the commissioners, let's start with Commissioner Rodriguez. Do you have any questions of the presentation?
Thank you for the presentation. I just have a few questions. For building 1 and 2, for the bricks, I don't know if it's just me or the paper, but are they 2 different colors?
I'll leave it at a paper issue. They would be the same on both buildings.
No, one looks darker than the other. And then on Charles Street, are there going to be any designated parking spots on that street, or no?
There is street parking on Charles that's on city property, so that we would, when we redo curb and drainage system along there, we're gonna end up improving about half of Charles Street. And there's 2 or 3 parking spots that would be parallel spots off of Charles.
Okay. And then, I can't tell if there's a separate, and there's an entrance on East Cotati. Is there a lane to turn into the entrance, or do the cars have to cross the bicycle lane and then the bus stop? That section of East Cotati gets really busy since it merges from 2 to 1 lane.
Maybe I can help touch on that. So, it does merge. The merge is completed by the time you get to this structure. I believe it is completed at that point. The ingress, you would be able to just turn right in, or if you were coming down East Cotati, yes, you would have to cross both the bike lane, and it's not so much the bus stop. What's happening is there's a flare for the bus stop that you would kind of be going past that little flare area. It's just an area where the bus can move over, where there's no parking. So there's going to be some parking eliminated that's currently there today, in order to allow for that bus to kind of flare into the side of the road. And then when you're turning out of there, any left turn would be restricted. So they would not be able to turn across all that traffic. For example, if they wanted to get onto Old Red, they would have to exit out onto Charles Street and make a right, and that would also be a right turn only, and then take that way up to Old Red. I don't know if that answered your question, but they would be crossing across the bike lane there, yeah. But there wouldn't be any parking there, no.
Got it. And then what
Yeah,
about the street?
just to add, sorry, go ahead. Just to add to that bike lane in theory is going to go all the way, it'll continue east on East Cotati, and there'll be other businesses that cross into that, whether it gets designated as a green zone or not, but there will be cross traffic. It's not uncommon.
All right. And then my next question was the street right across, right next to the fire station. The light to turn left on Old Redwood Highway to East Cotati, it takes a long time, and I've seen people cut through and use that street and then turn left on East Cotati. Is there a way are you going to address that somehow?
It's not being addressed as part of this project. I think what you're identifying is something that we're aware of happens, and it's just, this project is not going to address that kind of circulation issue, which is really part of the reason we have that issue, is just the historic layout of the roads. That hexagon pattern kind of creates that situation. What we aren't going to do is do something like what was done at Arthur, where the street is blocked. That kind of solution is not currently on the table for any of those streets where there is that cutoff. So I think at this point, no, this project wouldn't address that.
Okay.
Is this something that's being looked at as a part of the local road safety plan that you mentioned early in the presentation?
You know, I was almost going to say so, but I don't know. I don't think roadway layouts, and especially something like the historic roadways, I mean, they are a historic feature. So we're not manipulating those in any way. We even made Henry make sure that he wasn't manipulating those in any way as part of his study. But we are looking at safety features, and we are looking at crash data, and I don't know specifically what those numbers are there or what the solution might be. I know at the corner of William, I don't think this addresses this question, because I think what Jonathan's talking about is the cut through on La Plaza behind the fire department. Is that correct, Jonathan?
Correct.
Yeah.
Wait,
Yeah.
JP, can I just chime in on that for a second? You know,
Sure.
there's a stop sign that just went in there.
That's right. Yeah, there is one that went in there. So they are making some improvements. Thank you. Thank you.
And then,
I think that will probably, once people have done that once, they realize it's not the speedway that it used to be.
true.
Yeah.
And then the balconies on the second and third story, what do the bottom units get? Do they get like a patio?
They get the square, they get to go.
There's no designated private space for the bottom units.
All right. I think that's all the questions I have. I do have a couple comments. I do really like the idea of having more units on the bottom than retail space, but that's just my opinion and my preference. And I do like the vines on the side. I think it was building 1? Maybe add more vines somehow to the exterior of both buildings, just to give it more character.
Thank you, Commissioner Rodriguez. Any other questions that you have? Or staff or Mr. Wicks? Okay, and now we'll go to Commissioner Moore.
Hi, thank you, Vice Chair Lemus. So I had a couple questions of staff. One was, what's the percentage of retail that we have that's available right now in Cotati?
I'm not sure I follow the question. I mean, what is the percentage of
The percentage
that's
right now in
available?
Cotati that you can rent. So overall, is there 70% that's retail that is, has existing businesses in it? Do we have like a 30%?
Vacancy?
Vacancy, yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
I don't know if Noah might be able to chime in here, might have something, because he works closer with the Commerce Department.
Yeah, I've been the kind of the community development liaison with regards to economic development matters, but I am not aware of our current commercial vacancy rate, which that is an excellent question.
Yeah.
And I will do some research to get that for you.
Yeah, because I think that really makes a difference for me if we don't really have a lot of vacancies right now and things are really ramping up. I think we're going to be filling in retail. And if we don't have a lot of retail available, then they go someplace else. I do have some concerns of what Jonathan said when people are turning on from from Old Red to East Cotati Avenue and they're merging right where the firehouse is. That seems to be a little bit of a hazard if you're not in the right lane, if you're in the left lane and you're merging in, I don't think people really understand that whole concept of letting people into one lane. So my concern would be just to make that a little safer right there, because if you're gonna have pedestrians and you're gonna have more activity right there and people crossing streets and, yeah, I think it's already, people speed up to merge in, and so there's an escalation of speed right there. I have some concern about crossing all the way through that there's a double line right now to get into the property, so, I guess I didn't really understand, maybe JP can go through that one more time. So as you're coming onto East Cotati Avenue, you'll be able to turn into the building right there. Is that what I'm?
Trying to get a better view of it myself, but
Yeah, I think that's just not, I mean, I was looking at the plans, it was just a little unclear what was gonna be only right turn and
it's right turn only as you're exiting the property.
on both properties.
On both at driveway entrances, yes.
Okay,
Yeah, so in both of those, as you're leaving, you can only make a right turn.
so as you're coming down, you can just turn, say you're coming down on East Cotati Avenue, or you're coming down from Oliver's on one side.
Right.
Can you go across those double lines and turn in?
And what there is there is a center turn lane in that area, which allows for turning in either direction, left or right. So it does otherwise known as the suicide lane, but there is a center turn line there. So you would be able to use that, and then turn, move into there and then turn left into the development, if I understand you. So you're wondering if you're heading westbound on East Cotati Avenue, will you be able to turn into that? And the answer is yes. What's there is a center turn lane, so it allows for that type of turning movement. The other comment I want to make, and one of the conditions of the engineering department, which, to be quite honest, I don't support, but it is the engineering department, is to remove the parking along the frontage, along East Cotati, remove all that parking there to have less conflicts. But there's reasons I don't support that. One, I think we need the parking. Two, I don't see it as problematic as other people see it. But that is a condition, nonetheless, that's coming from the engineering department. And maybe that will satisfy some of the concerns that you're having over all that activity along that section of the road. Yeah.
Well, I think with cars there, it does prevent some visibility for even pedestrians and bicyclists. Okay, I think those are my questions. I did have a question of staff you recommended 27 units, and then the applicant has recommended 29.
The applicant originally applied for 29, which included those 5 residential units on the eastern building, building 2. We requested that the applicant remove 2 of those units, the ones that provided the most frontage along East Cotati Avenue, and convert those units to commercial floor area. And if you saw on Henry's plan, or actually if you can look at the different floor plans, or if you could go back a few slides on this particular view that's up now, we could look at those side by side. But that was our request, that he remove those 2 remove those 2 units, so that we could get closer to what the BSP calls for, which is pretty much 100% commercial frontage, and also we get the floor area ratio of commercial to residential up higher, closer to 25%. Right there, stop please.
Okay.
So this is the ground floor of building 2 that you're looking at, two different floor plans. The one on the left includes the more commercial space. It just isn't showing how it might be divided up into different units, but all of that would be the commercial space up there. And then on the one on the right, you can see the 5 units. So those are the two differences between what we're recommending, what the applicant actually applied for, and what they're requesting the planning commission move forward with. Retail space is limited. I think the markets go up and down, and at times there's more vacancies, at times there's less. I will just leave it at that. The DSP calls for that to be commercial frontage along East Cotati. It doesn't have that same requirement for Charles Street. And our mixed use, the rules for mixed use try to get the amount of commercial, or try to make sure that the residential doesn't exceed 75% of like a building's floor area, if that makes sense. Hopefully it did. But a quarter of it can be commercial is basically what we're trying to target at.
Okay, yeah, those were my questions.
May I interject a little bit to help clarify your question about the street section at East Cotati?
Sure.
If I could get to go back a couple of slides to the site plan. Perfect. No, there you go. Maybe the text is too small, but the street sections that we've designed this project to meet the street sections that are prescribed in the DSP. Both just on it for the plaza, but I didn't emphasize East Cotati. So in that text, on the kind of the upper portion of the slide, we tried to designate what that street section and the sizes of that will be. Both the sidewalk in front of building 2 and building 1 for that matter. Then there'll be a 9-foot designated parallel parking spot for where it does conflict with the bus stop. And at the bus stop, you can see a flare, a dashed line flaring from the tree on the right-hand side to just at the in and out of the roadway off of East Cotati. There's another flare there. So that's a no park zone already designated. So we've calculated that we would get 3 parking spaces in front of La Plaza and about 5 or 6 in front of building 2. So parallel lane 9 feet, then we have a designated 5-foot bike lane, which would be green painted. We'd have an 11-foot traffic aisle and a 12-foot wide as a left-right turn lane. And it serves not just our project, but it serves the deli and the commercial and residential spots on the south side on the north side of East Cotati. So without that turn lane, you'd be cutting off ingress and egress to those projects as well as our project. As JP alluded to, there'd be a right in and right out only on East Cotati, with a left turn in from the designated turn lane. My opinion and my experience with traffic and traffic calming measures is the wider you make a road, the faster people are going to go. The narrower, and put parking on it, put bicycles on it, it's going to have a traffic calming effect. So I would urge you to consider that and look at some other examples. I could give you some examples, but I'm sure you've seen them in Palo Alto, up in Windsor. They got the backup in front of the Olivers up there. I've been shopping there frequently. That stretch of Old Red Highway is fairly calming. I think honestly believe that because of not only the diagonal parking that you have to back into, but the bike lane and a fairly narrow traffic aisle to have to go through. So that's my little.
All right, great. Those are my questions so far.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Moore. So my questions are, I have a few questions. One of my questions is, I've never seen a stacked parking. I don't know if there is one in Santa Rosa or somewhere else. But I wondered if the 58 on-site spaces include the stacked parking plus additional parking and street parking, or only the on-site, in the new project, not on the street?
Just real quick, the 50, the 58 spaces, just to answer your question real quick, include only the parking that's on site. So you can see the little numbers here. There's a 19 in one structure, 15 in the other, and then the other ones are surface area parking. The 58 does, and so 18 of those 58, 18 of them are actually stacked above other ones. The parking calculations do not include any of the on-street parking in the calculations that are in the staff report.
Do you know with the stacked parking process, is it loud? Does it make noise? Do you know anything about how it operates?
I don't know. I mean, I only know how mechanically it works, but I don't know about noise, nor have I ever seen one work. And I don't know if Henry has some additional information on that.
Yeah, fairly quiet from a noise standpoint. The somewhat ingenious part of it is there's always one vacant spot on the ground level within. Let's just take the one at Building 2, which has the number 15. So there's 8 spots below, but one of those 8 spots would always be a no park area. And that allows this system to slide in a number of 1, 2, 3, 7 to get the car to open the always vacant spot below down. Drive off, slide back, put a car up or car down. So the kind of accordion system lets that lower level shift to accommodate a car from coming from above, either down or up. So
Sylvia, it does say that, I'm looking at the sheet, and it says numerous sound control features are standard. The hydraulic power unit is mounted on rubber pads. Steel hydraulic lines are mounted with rubber pipe supports, and rubber hose isolates the power unit from the steel hydraulic lines. Sound test directly in front of the machine shows 67 decibels. A weighting noise levels. Speech at that feed is 68 decibels. So it's approximately equivalent to speech, normal speech, probably outdoor speech, not whispering.
Okay. And is that on its own
That's
power?
really consistent with our noise standards, that decibel level too.
And is it on its own power source? Or, because right now I know that with summer and the heat and the fires, we might have some rolling blackouts. So is it tied to regular energy, or does it have its own power source?
Good question.
We'll probably tie into its own power source with a battery backup system. So if there's an emergency concerns for getting up and down. So I believe we have an emergency backup system for it, for those power outages.
Okay. And then another question that I had is that this new proposal, the numbers have changed, and I know that we need housing, but it's gone from like 12 units to 27 units, which is more than double. And I know, JP, that you said it doesn't really impact traffic, but that's kind of what I'm curious, like, how does it not impact traffic? It just seems like if we go more than double of housing, and like I said, housing is important, we need it. But I just kind of want to understand a little more about how traffic is not really impacted by people who reside there versus businesses.
Right, so the reduction in trips is dramatic when you start to remove the commercial floor area. That's, so where, and previously that entire bottom floor of building 2 was all commercial. So, just for example, if you calculate trips in a commercial building at basically 44, 45 trips per 8,000 square feet. So you get a lot of trips, as opposed to a residential unit, which generates only 7 trips per unit. So it's really just math. So it's 44.3 trips per 8,000 square feet of commercial versus 7 trips for each residential unit. And that's why. So by removing, having 3 units, that's what we're calculating, by having 3 units down on that lower floor and eliminating that floor space, that's where your big savings in trips and traffic comes from. The savings is even more dramatic if you go with the 29 units that the applicant is asking for. It even drives the trips even lower. And the comparison is the first one generated 663 trips back in April of 2020. What we're recommending approval of would generate about 592 trips. And what Henry's requesting approval of would generate 523 trips. And then those trips, what I don't have is the breakdown on where each one of those hours came from. I do have it for Henry's project and the main project, but not for what we asked them to revise. But it doesn't matter, the numbers are getting less in general and at peak time.
Okay, those are the questions that I had. Thank you, JP, for that. So what is the next step after we've already given our comments? Do we go to the public now, or?
Right.
Okay.
You'd want to take public comments, and then after public comments, come back to the commission and ask any additional questions or make any additional comments that you might have, and then request that someone make a motion. We have a quorum tonight to approve this project. 2 of those votes would have to be affirmative for approving the resolution.
Okay, so why don't we go to public comment if we have anyone from the public that would like to comment on this?
Thank you, Vice Chair Lemus. For our attendees tonight, please use the raise hand icon or dial *9 if you're dialing in from your telephone. Vice Chair Lemus, it appears that we'll end public comment.
Thank you. Okay, so now we'll go back to the commission to see if there's any additional questions. Any commissioners? Okay.
Actually, sorry.
Go ahead.
For the back parking, the spout, what do you call them if for some reason it breaks down, or if someone is having trouble getting their car out? Do they have their own mechanic?
I'm going to let Henry respond to that question.
Yeah, the systems, we did some research. There's a couple of manufacturers, and there is a 24-hour hotline to call up if there's a problem. There's some emergency procedures that an on-site property manager could do in the interim, but like an elevator or other elements in the building that require maintenance and periodic review, that would be done on these systems. And they sell themselves on being reliable and used heavily on a daily basis, you know, at least one trip to go to work and one trip when you come home. So the cycle and testing on them is fairly reliable, and they're heavier on East Coast, European countries. I mean, they're the one we're looking at, Klaus, is a German company, and they've been in existence for some time, and haven't been as popular as they are now because we typically would design a parking garage or go subterranean, but with construction costs the way they are, this type of system has overcome those issues and is becoming more prevalent. I think you'll see more of them.
All right, thank you.
I don't have any other questions, Sylvia, but I do, I would like to talk about, as the commission, whether we want 27 or 29 residents. I'm leaning towards 27 just because I know the retail portion of Cotati is only going to be ramping up. And we walk frequently downtown and I don't see a lot of vacancies right now. But that's the one point that I think we need to talk about as a commission.
Okay, so we have two proposals. We have the 27 unit and the 29 unit. Staff recommends a 27 unit. So I'll go to the commission to ask if they have any kind of questions or concerns between 27 or 29 unit. Commissioner Rodriguez?
I prefer the 29. I understand that the market goes up and down, and you can't really predict, retail and anything like that, really. But I think having more housing is more beneficial, in my opinion.
Now, I know Commissioner Moore had asked an important question that we didn't have the answer to, which was the percentage of retail vacancy. So I don't know if that would make a difference to any of the commissioners if we had that information, or if we could make a decision today based on kind of what we know and what we see. Commissioner Moore had mentioned that she walks around and sees the vacancy, that there's not, there's a lot of vacancy seems to be full. That's what she was mentioning.
Mr. Lemus, if I may, there
Yes.
might be a third alternative, which is kind of a middle of the road between the two. And that is that we move forward with 27 units, but include a condition recognizing that if he's unable to fill that retail space after a certain number of years, and making a fair effort to actually, have the retail space, that we could reconsider, and maybe even at the staff level, reconsider a tenant improvement that would switch that out from commercial to residential. That's a possibility. It's always within the mixed-use building, and given the environment that we're in California, to add residential units is easy. To later go and remove residential units, let's say we wanted that to be retail space, nearly impossible to actually remove residential units that are inhabited, given where the state laws are going. So I just throw that out there as something else that you may want to consider as kind of a middle ground between an either or, hard either or. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, JP. I was also leaning towards 27, especially when staff recommended that, and part of the DSP is that the front should be retail, like a commercial, right? 100% commercial on a frontage. And so that's what I was leaning to, 27 units as well. So I don't know if at this point, if there's any other discussions from the commissioners, or if someone wants to make a motion at this time, or do we have more discussion?
I think I'm good.
I like what JP mentioned with the condition about, you know, after a certain amount of years, if you can't fill the retail space, then convert it to an apartment.
Okay, does one of the commissioners want to make a motion?
Yeah, what page is the motion on, JP?
It's on page 86 of their printed packet.
It's also on the agenda. The resolution language is also on the agenda.
That's correct.
I can move to approval.
Yeah, Jonathan, I think, go ahead.
Can I interrupt so we can get you some, I'd respectfully like to ask for a continuance, so we can get you some more data on vacancy rates in the downtown, and,
That continuance won't be, that will not be until August. I need you to be aware of that, Henry.
This is Noah House. I will also say, I just have been doing a little bit of research right now. I think any information we're going to provide on commercial vacancy rates will have a huge aspect given the impacts of COVID-19 and where we're coming right now. The accuracy or the kind of market predictability, I think, would be limited based on any recent information that we would be able to provide. The most recent market studies that I was able to find and some quick research were based on 2019, which obviously are not going to be adequate. And further, staff is very supportive of the commercial elements, given the direction of the DSP and the proximity to the downtown core of this project.
Okay, so if the motion stands on the floor, Jonathan's about to make a motion.
Yeah.
Did you want to read the motion, resolution?
Yes. Resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Cotati approving preliminary design review for 2 new 3-story mixed-use buildings consisting of 27 residential units and 10,383 square feet of commercial floor area located at 8170 La Plaza and 100 to 128 East Cotati Avenue.
Okay,
Do I have to
so-
read the?
No, that's okay. Thank you. So motion made by Commissioner Rodriguez. Is there a second?
I'll second.
So at this point, we'll ask for a roll call vote.
Commissioner Rodriguez,
Yes.
Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
Vice Chair Lemus,
Yes. Okay, so that motion passes on a 3-0 with 2 absent. And so at this point, we'll move on to the next item. The next item is preliminary and final design review to allow a complete renovation and reoccupancy of the structures and construction of full site improvements for the property at 8125, 8145, and 8175 Highway 116 in the commercial Gravenstein Highway zoning district.
Thank you, Vice Chair Lemus. Just my PowerPoint is coming up, and I will see if I can control the presentation. I haven't been able to the last few meetings, so Laura, I might ask you to take over, or Carrie, but it's seeming like I can. So, as identified, the project before the commission this evening is design review for a project we're calling Red's Dispensary, but that may not be the the final design of the project or name of the project as we move into construction. And it looks like, Carrie, I'm going to have to ask you to advance the slides if you would move to the next one. So as identified, requests for preliminary and final design review to allow renovations and full site improvements to the structures at 8125, 8145, and 8175 Gravenstein Highway in the commercial Gravenstein Highway zoning district, file number PA 20/26, and we'll go to the next slide. So this slide is just intended to identify the project location, to give some context. If you just advance the slide one time, it will highlight the parcel. It's located on the northwest corner of Alder Avenue and Highway 116, but kind of has a unique shape. And interestingly, only the front portion of the project site is being affected by the proposed renovations. And if you advance the slide one more time, it identifies that the center building is proposed for occupancy by the retail cannabis dispensary use. The buildings to the left and right will be occupied by other commercial uses. And we do have a comment letter from a bakery that's interested in occupying one of the spaces right now, but nothing confirmed. And that would be an allowed use under the current zoning district of CG. We'll go to the next slide. So similarly, this slide just provides some context. The entire Highway 116 corridor west of 101 is in the commercial Gravenstein corridor zoning district. And then, Carrie, if you just advance the slide once, it'll highlight the parcel there, just showing, so you have a little bit of context, identifying where the property is. But again, remember, this is just a portion of the site that's proposed for development. We'll go to the next slide. So background, there's more background in the staff report, but I just wanted to highlight that this project, kind of similar to some of our projects in town, has been trying to move forward in various forms for several years. In October of 16, an application was filed to redevelop the whole site with a retail building on the frontage and then a 125-unit assisted living facility with the remaining northern portion of the site. In June of 2018, the applicant was granted approval to operate a commercial cannabis retail facility from the site, and at that time it was assumed that it would be from the newly built retail building. In October of 2019, the City Council approved, granted the final entitlement for that project. In September of 2020, staff issued building permits to allow the repair of those buildings. No design changes were approved, but it allowed the applicant to move forward and begin repairs as they put together their design package. They filed design review to renovate those existing buildings, and that's the project that's before this evening. And in the meantime, in April of this year, the council granted an extension to that approved cannabis permit, retail permit, contingent on approval of design review by the Planning Commission. And of course, nothing in this summary doesn't identify the impacts of the COVID-19 emergency declaration or its impact on commercial project financing or economic viability, which obviously has played a large part in the decisions on the applicant's part, as well as our response to it. It also does not discuss the significant conversations and coordination between staff and the applicant to get the project to this place, just to provide a little bit more context. And we'll go to the next slide. So this is the current site. However, there are some changes that have occurred. Carrie, if you advance the slide, it'll highlight these two structures have been demolished. So the Reds Recovery Room, former bar, did sit on this property. It was demolished after actually 2 fires and some significant life safety concerns over the response to those fires. These buildings they all have been in a relatively dilapidated condition and were essentially being targeted by vandalism and even some homelessness issues. And so in response to city code enforcement action after the second fire, the applicants demolished the Reds building, and then the small home that's on the northern parcel with the northern red square has also been demolished. It's in the location of the new driveway, which has been required as a condition of approval. And if you advance the slide one more time, and that condition was really to address what's seen as a safety issue. The 2 ingress points on Highway 116 as well as Alder Avenue are none of them are compliant with city standards. putting multiple ingress and egress points onto the highway as folks accelerate out of town is not compliant with any established standard, and then also the location of the front driveway on Alder is too close to that intersection. So all those were an issue that we asked the applicants to resolve through their design work. We'll go to the next slide. So this is the site plan that's proposed before the commission. This is the landscape plan, so we wanted to show all the planting context, the outdoor seating areas that are provided, bicycle parking, full pedestrian circulation, the revised ingress and egress, which Carrie, if you'll just click one more time, it'll highlight that entrance point right there. That will be the sole entry and exit point of the to the site. As identified, there is bicycle parking adjacent to that outdoor area, the easternmost outdoor area adjacent to Building C. New trash enclosure, fully compliant with all the 3 waste stream requirements. And what's shown on here is Alder Avenue. There is a full sidewalk being built as a part of the Alder Avenue frontage improvements. So we'll go to the next slide. So this slide is kind of unique in that some of the other, I would say, concessions that the applicant has agreed to, the highlighted area on the south of the site in blue fully identifies all the area of the applicant's property that they're willing to dedicate to the city to allow the future widening of Highway 116. So that is all land that's required to fully build out Highway 116 in the full improvements that are envisioned by the city's general plan. The applicant has agreed to dedicate that land to the city, and then obviously to close the 2 entry points that we've discussed. In addition, on Alder Avenue, the green highlights the sidewalk improvements, but east of those improvements are 3 parallel parking spaces and a bike lane that the applicant will be constructing on Alder Avenue, also in keeping with the direction of the city and the general plan design criteria. And then finally, the kind of the pink and purple highlight that a portion of the northern parcel is also being used to provide access and parking serving this site, but it's to the joint benefits of both properties. As mentioned in the zoning analysis, the parking is actually overparked based on the retail complex parking standards, and generally our staff will never ask that a project exceed the parking requirements. However, in this situation, given that we don't know what the actual uses and demands are for those adjacent spaces, the 2 commercial spaces that could come in as a restaurant, utilizing a lot of outdoor seating, which would bump up the parking demand. And as that northern site develops, there may be a little bit of reciprocal benefits from having a few extra parking spaces. And so staff is supportive of that. We'll move to the next slide. This is a conceptual elevation provided by the applicant. I'll let them present their architecture. However, staff does feel that it really kind of represents kind of a nice mix of the agrarian past of the city, while also moving to build a nice commercial storefront facade as a retail complex. One thing worth noting is that the cornice detail, or the kind of the top edge of the building on the 2 eastern and western buildings, that's very detailed. And then along the center building, it's very simple. And so one of the conditions of approval directs that the applicant simplify the cornice detail on the eastern and western buildings and make it slightly more decorative on the center building, and consider making it the same detail across the 2 or across the 3 structures as an effort to try to add a little bit more continuity between the 3 buildings. However, it's also worth noting that the entry points on the eastern and western buildings provide a metal similar to the siding that's proposed to the center building, and the windows and doors all are black framed to try to bring that context all together to make the buildings match. We'll go to the next slide. So just jumping into the analysis portion as identified in the staff report. So the project, the existing conditions, as we've talked about, the site is fairly dilapidated and has been kind of the site of numerous challenges, both for, I think, for the applicant and for the city. It's a 3.13 acre parcel. The buildings have definitely been underutilized. They've been vacant for at least the last 2 years, and I think closer to 4 years, given when I know Red's closed, and I'm not sure when the other buildings have been most recently occupied. The purpose of design review in Cotati is to ensure that the design of the development and new uses maintain this and enhance the city's small town character, ensure new uses and structures are compatible with the highest standards of improvement in the surrounding neighborhood, retain and strengthen the visual quality and attractive character of the community, ensure that these new structures and site planning promote energy conservation, ensure that the proposed landscaping emphasizes native species, and recognize the interdependence of land uses and circulation for efficient interconnected system of streets and pedestrian ways. And then the goal of the design review was also to assist the developers in understanding the city's concerns for aesthetics and development, and then also ensure that that development complies with all city standards. As identified in the staff report, staff is supportive of the design and finds that it's consistent with all the purpose of design review. Similarly, in the general plan, this designation is specifically identified as providing for basic business and service needs of the local community, including shopping centers, neighborhood-oriented retail, and highway-oriented commercial uses. And staff finds that it does a good job of trying to kind of meet all three of those objectives, and then also is sensitive to the land use pattern, the existing one by reusing those existing buildings, kind of maintaining a supply of the commercial needs, the commercial square footage and spaces that we need here in the community, focusing growth in an area of an existing development, and numerous other policies as identified in the general plan. With regards to the zoning, staff provided an analysis that identifying how the project meets the setbacks, building frontage type, lot coverage, height, and parking. It is worth noting that the setbacks meet what's called the build to line, and so it has a 30-foot setback from the future right of way. So that's worth noting that right now it won't meet the future vision of the setbacks, but ultimately as 116 builds out, it will be 100% consistent with that 30-foot directed build-to line. And staff's already provided a summary of why we are supportive of providing a little bit more parking than is required. And then as a part of the CEQA review, we specifically asked the applicant to provide an analysis of traffic impacts, potential traffic impacts associated with this change in the previously approved project, as well as potential biologic impacts, given that it's in the western part of town, where we know we have California tiger salamander habitat. And those studies came back both to identify that there are no significant impacts with relation to traffic, and because the development is keeping all construction in areas that are previously disturbed, because the site's been developed previously, there are no concerns over CTS impacts. There are conditions of approval ensuring that as a part of the resolution. And that was a nice segue right into the conditions of approval. So numerous portions of what have been talked about tonight are discussed in the project conditions, which could be found on packet page 168. They're specific to requiring additional larger trees. So rather than the standard tree size, we required additional 24-inch box size trees in all the landscape planning. So there's an instant presence with that landscaping. The cornice detail and a little bit of architectural requirements have been identified in the conditions of approval, as well as some of the measures needed in place to minimize environmental impacts. But with that, we'll go to the next slide. And this slide is just intended to highlight that the project site does allow the future implementation of the general plan. The commission will remember the general plan currently envisions that Alder Avenue may close and become a cul-de-sac. And so we really needed to know that this project would not impede the ability for that to occur. This slide shows that, and it's available in the project packet as well. And then also we wanted to see how the frontage improvements of Alder and 116 would line up with the eastern site's development. So as the eastern site develops, they're going to build the curb gutter sidewalk along the frontage of their site, and likely be required to build the curb gutter sidewalk on this site as well, on 116, because we have turn lanes coming into and out of Alder, and then the planter strip and sidewalk that would be required to continue across the project frontage. So with that, we'll go to the next slide, which is the recommendation. It is recommended by the Community Development Department that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution approving preliminary and final design review to allow the complete renovation and construction of full site improvements for the structures at 8125, 8145, and 8175 Gramercy Highway in the CG zoning district. And the applicant, Mr. Steve Monahan, is here and has a brief presentation to give as well. If the commission would like to hold out for questions in case he may answer.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for your time this evening. I had a presentation that I sent in earlier today. I don't know if it's possible to pull that up on everyone's screen, please. Wonderful. Okay, if you would advance the slide, please.
One moment, please. One moment, please.
Got it. Thank you, Carrie. Sorry about the dogs in the background. All right. Well, again, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here this evening. So this project is a proposed project is a redevelopment and improvement of existing structures at the corner of Highway 116 and Alder Avenue. This project enhances the western approach to Cotati and will feature substantially upgraded landscaping throughout the project, especially at the corner of Highway 116 and Alder. We'll be improving the building facades, adding new windows, and substantially enhancing the overall condition of the site. We are bringing a neighborhood-oriented commercial center to the western end of Cotati, and the goal is to move in an approved dispensary project into the middle building, which we call Building B. We've been working with a local Cotati resident who has a bakery, and we are in the final negotiations of our lease with her presently, and she'll be moving into the westernmost building, which we call Building A. We are actively searching for a third tenant in the easternmost building, which we call Building C. This project is consistent with the general plan vision for Western Cotati and is consistent with the CG zoning district standards. We will be enhancing safety for the community by closing off all access to Highway 116, as Mr. Hausch noted, and also closing off a close driveway to Highway 116 and pushing the entrance to the drive aisle back about 150 feet. In consideration for approval of this project, we are offering a substantial amount of property on the front of our property towards the future widening of Highway 116. There is a 19-foot designation that will allow for the widening of Highway 116, the road itself. We're also offering a 9-foot dedication to the city, which will enable a 5-foot wide sidewalk and also a 4-foot wide landscaping setback to just provide a barrier between traffic and pedestrians. We are also offering along the eastern edge of the property room for a drive aisle, a bike lane, a parking aisle, and then a 12-foot commercial sidewalk with street trees. So that is all going to be installed and performed by us as a part of the project. This site is potentially CTS, but because we're working within previously disturbed areas, we're not going to be impacting any endangered habitat. Our traffic report has come back that there's no substantial traffic impact to this intersection as a result of our project. If you'd advance the next slide, please, Gary. So just a couple of general plan consistencies analysis. So under section 6 of the general plan, economic vitality, this project will contribute to the economic vitality of the city of Cotati as specified in the 2015 general plan. Goal EV1 is to establish and maintain a healthy local economy that includes a diversity of commercial and industrial enterprises, which provide goods, services, and employment opportunities to the residents of Cotati that's consistent with Cotati's small town image. And this project will contribute to the economic vitality through an increase to the economic task base of the city. We're going to create opportunities for local businesses, as evidenced by the bakery business, to come in and establish themselves. We believe that this project will enhance Western Cotati with a new commercial zone and upgraded landscaping and general enhancement to that area of the city. The dispensary that we've received an approval from the city council for, conservatively, we believe will bring in about $225,000 of tax income for the city once that project is stabilized. Next slide, please. And finally, this project exists in the commercial Gravenstein corridor, and that general plan calls for the general commercial land use designation provides for the basic business and service needs of the local community, including shopping centers, neighborhood-oriented retail, and highway-oriented commercial uses. And we would consider this a neighborhood-oriented retail. And we believe that this project fits perfectly into that designation. Land Use Policy 3.6 under Section 7 of the 2015 General Plan support the continued development and intensification of employment centers throughout all non-residential areas of the city. And the cannabis dispensary that goes into this location will add jobs and comply with this directive. Additionally, the opportunity for the bakery to come in a third location we believe is going to enhance and satisfy this land use policy. We are also complying with Land Use Policy 3.8 of the General Plan by providing future dedications for the implementation of pedestrian and bicycle paths along the frontage of the property. And we are also providing orchard-style parking in our site plan where there's a lot of trees and breaking up of parking spaces so it doesn't feel like a big monolithic shopping center. Next slide, please. So this is a site plan. On the north side, we have a trash enclosure that will have room for all three different types of streams of trash, recycling, and compost for the project. We've moved the entrance to the site to the north of Highway 116 by 150 feet, which is, again, in compliance with the general plan. We've closed off all access to Highway 116 from the project frontage. We believe that we're providing a very nice improvement to this area. We're going to have a nice cedar trellis, seating elements, enhanced landscaping, ample bike parking, and we believe that the design elements that we've added to the project are generally going to enhance this area. Next slide, please. This is just a slightly different perspective, same plan, but more of a landscaping focus. As you can see, there's a lot of trees and a lot of shrubbery and additional enhancements that we believe are going to really make this place look great. Next slide, please. So I'm going to hand this off to Tyler Kovic, who's our architect, and let him talk about the design elements of the project.
Hi, Commissioners. Thank you for your time tonight. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And Noah, thank you for the presentation. Appreciate your help tonight, but also over the last 6 months working with us to refine this design and get us to the place where we are now. A little bit about the aesthetics of what we're looking at and what we've been doing to kind of develop this site has a lot to do with, how you take on adaptive historic reuse and, make something, kind of honor the tradition where it's come from and also add new elements that give it character and give it some new language. We've taken a lot of cues on this project from the center building, which was kind of the building of highest quality on the site that pre-exists, that pre-exists this current, today, and probably was maybe even of higher quality than Red's recovery room. The building has kind of a concrete stem wall, and it has, story and a half, nice built barn space with steel trusses, and it has some nice kind of historic agrarian character to it. And so first and foremost, what we did on the project was to kind of bring, we wanted to create some symmetry around the center structure and to allow kind of the eye and the kind of retail experience to center around that building, which is the largest structure and it's the most significant on the property. Secondly, we kind of took its, what do I want to call it, like kind of Old West pop-up kind of that you can see here in center building B to building A and building C, and that was with the encouragement of planning staff, and wanted to kind of give some continuity to the vibe and the story and how the buildings interrelate with each other. We mostly left the cladding here on the center building that it historically was, this kind of corrugated metal that's not dissimilar to like the Barlow or some industrial modern, some semi-modern industrial spaces that you've probably experienced out there. And we brought some of that over here into buildings A and C, but wanted those buildings to sit back a little bit more and make them a little bit more humble. So we've added board and batten siding and a little bit more of like a craftsman aesthetic to those spaces, and have those spaces a little bit more agrarian-like than this industrial modern, which though it was agrarian build center structure, is make them a little less powerful towards the street. The other thing that we've introduced is this horizontal element that you can see that kind of ties all the buildings together and kind of creates a secondary walking space from the sidewalk or from the street. And so there's this wrapping pergola. There's a small outdoor pergola, outside space between buildings A and C. Building A, the furthest to the left, building address 8125. Is currently imagined as bakery, but not yet has been applied for the TI. This permit does apply for the TI for the dispensary in the middle and a future unknown retail use there at building C furthest to the east. Building to the east, also with the development of the planning, with planning folks includes this larger pergola to the east that looks over on Alder Avenue and kind of encourages a lot of sitting out there, facing the road and kind of giving some wraparound character and a little bit of, it kind of honors the corner on Alder Avenue. Let's see. And a little bit, and another element we've added recently to make buildings A and C, though the intention is to make them humble, to give them a little bit more of a pronounced entrance, is that we've added a little bit of a stronger character to these pop-ups and put this kind of transom, spandrel panel here above the doors on building A and C, and to highlight those entrances and get people oriented towards the entry sequence. I think other than that, I don't have much more to say about the architecture. Once again, it's a little bit like kind of Roadhouse, American Roadhouse meets agrarian structure and a little bit of adaptive reuse thinking. So
we also have a couple more perspectives if we want to advance the slide. One, please. Yeah.
We've also added, you can see in this slide, some steel awnings over top these other two entrances in building B. And once again, to introduce that horizontality of that is, carried over into the pergola on the east of Building C. And you have any more slides there, Steve?
I think we have, yeah.
And then this gives a little bit closer perspective of how we envision these entry sequences and some shade spaces, and hopefully creating not a extremely formal pergola kind of strip mall. We didn't want to be completely. We looked around some surrounding structures to the east and the west, and we wanted to avoid a strip mall feeling, but still give some entry sequencing that brought the scale down and brought the human experience towards the entry of all three of the buildings. And that is what we're seeking with the pergolas and with the kind of the transition space between, the asphalt drive surround and the buildings themselves. And once again, give them some more humility and bring in some character, so that, basically to encourage more pedestrian access and usability. And
Thank you so
I think
much.
that's it. Cross over to Steve.
That's it. So I think that's all we have as the applicant. So we hand over our mic to whoever's next. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we'll go to questions from the commissioners, and we'll start with Commissioner Rodriguez. Any questions you might have?
I just have comments. I really like this design, and I think it's a great design for that area at Cotati, and it's, I'm really happy to hear that you already have vendors that want to move in there. So that's really good. And the time you guys took, to do all the traffic analysis and all of that was very appreciated, and I really like this. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Moore?
Just had a couple of questions about the landscaping in the back. You said something about they're going to do an orchard parking lot. Can you expound on that just a little bit more?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it, and Noah, please correct me if I step out of line here, but orchard-style parking is something that's in the city's general plan, and it basically calls for every 4 parking spaces to be intersected with a tree. So it just creates, more shade coverage and a better feel for the people that are parking in the area to, have a more beneficial experience. We have one exception to that on the northwest corner of our property where we have 6 parking spaces in a row, but we did that in order to accommodate an existing tree we are preserving and keeping alive, and that was something that staff was amicable to making an exception to that rule.
Okay. And then I just had a question. I love the idea of the pergolas. Is there any thought about doing any kind of vines or anything to soften that over time?
Actually, if you look at the first image that's on the screen right now, we had contemplated having some planters around the entrances and having a bit of a climbing, greenery element there. Around the rest of it, we hadn't contemplated that. We hadn't thought of that.
I decided I might soften the little greenery, always softens a new, or not a new building, but a building that's in need of softening, I should say. Though I didn't really have any questions. I had some comments, but I'll reserve those till after public comment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Moore. And I just had a question. I noticed when I was looking at the resolution for this plan that there was 98 conditions of approval from all the different departments and areas. And so is that because it was in pretty dilapidated stage that there almost every division put in a lot of conditions?
Yeah, that's a great question and a good point to make. So it's kind of a combination of the applicant's willingness to work with the city to give us, the dedications that they gave us, also to ensure that future implementation of the widening, et cetera, can all be accommodated with what gets developed here. We essentially don't want to ask the applicant to build anything that then has to get ripped out later, or at least to minimize any impacts of that. And then also, the site, it hasn't had a lot of love recently, and so to bring it up to current standards, there is quite a bit of specific requirements that the city has. And you'll see, as we're kind of treating this as almost new development, even though it is adaptive reuse. And you'll see, in order to bring a vacant site or a site that hasn't had any recent development up, it takes a significant amount of conditions, especially from the Public Works Department. And so you'll see that as a trend as you start to see more kind of greenfield development, or even in this situation, kind of trying to speak to both sides, the undeveloped portions, because there's no parking lot, no landscaping, as well as what's needed to bring the buildings to current standards.
Thank you. So that's the only question that I had. So at this time, I will go to public comment. If there's anyone in the public that would comment on this one.
Thank you, Vice Chair Lemus. And looking to our attendees tonight, please raise your hand. And that will end public comment.
Thank you. So now we'll bring it back to the commission for any comments before we move on to the next. Is there any comments? Commissioner Rodriguez?
Yeah, it's just two simple questions. On the back of the building where the orchard parking is that small building that's supposed to be moved 30 feet? Is that the building NOAA that was demolished?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And then, if I read correctly, a redwood tree was going to be cut down, or has to be?
Yes, there's a redwood tree on the site. We've applied for a tree removal permit and been granted that permit by the building department. And unfortunately, it's just dead smack in the middle of our drive aisle and was unable to be preserved.
Okay.
Yeah, so I will add, part of the decision here is a redwood tree being removed and a very small oak tree being removed that's in really poor health. It was located between the Reds building and one of the other existing building, C, I think, the easternmost building. Both those need to come out, just given their combination of the health and the need to move the driveway. The city council did see this site plan when they reviewed the cannabis permit, and the applicant not only has preserved the trees that they could on site, including one of the oaks that they are putting in one of the orchard parking planting areas, but also has essentially doubled the size of all the landscape trees that are being planted as compensation for that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll go to Commissioner Moore for any final comments or questions.
I don't have any questions, but I do like the name that it's Reds. It's historical. It's historic in Cotati that everybody basically has drank at Reds at one time or multiple times. And then I love the idea that we have another dispensary coming in along with a bakery, since one of our bakeries just left Cotati. So I think it's a good project. I think it fits in that neighborhood since we have another dispensary right down the road. And no, I don't have anything. I like the design. I think the middle building could be a little softer. I'm not so much into the industrial thing, but I can let that go. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner. And my comment, I just want to echo what some of the other commissioners say. I think it's a great project. It's a great way to kind of pick up that side of Western Cotati and to take an old building and turn it into, when I first started looking at it, I thought, this reminds me of the Barlow. And then I read in the future text language that it talked about comparison to the Barlow. So I think it's a great project, looking forward to it. And those are my comments. I didn't have any additional questions.
Thank you.
Okay, so at this point, I want to see if anyone wants to entertain a motion.
Make a motion So I move to approve the resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Cotati approving preliminary and final design review to allow a complete exterior renovation, including facade improvements, new siding, doors and windows, landscaping of the entire site, construction of a new parking lot, and frontage improvements for the structures at 8125, 8145, and 8175 Gravenstein Highway and the commercial Gravenstein corridor.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I second.
And we'll do a roll call vote?
Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
Commissioner Rodriguez,
Yes.
Vice Chair Lemus.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Okay, and now, thank you. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Okay, now we'll move on to the next topic. And the next one is proposed multifamily objective design standards, amendments to the multifamily open space standards, and proposed telecommunication and small cell design guidelines. So that's for a staff report on this?
Yes, Joel Galbraith, Senior Planner. The item before you is the Objective Design Standards and Telecommunications Small Cell Design Guidelines. Next slide, please. To give you some background, in 2018, Senate Bill 35, which is a state law, went into effect and requires a streamlining of qualifying multifamily projects. On these types of projects, only a building permit is required, subject to it meeting the objective design standards, as well as any other city objective standards. What are the benefits? It provides clarity for residential developers and applicants, provides more certainty for project approval, provides increased clarity for residents about the type of development that could occur in their neighborhoods. Next slide, please. The Planning Commission conducted a workshop on this item back in March of this year. At the workshop, staff presented the results of a visual preference survey. Staff presented draft multifamily objective design standards. Staff also presented draft telecommunication design guidelines. And at the workshop, in general, the Planning Commission was concerned that the objective design standards were not strict enough and did not require a specific architectural style. Next slide, please. In May of this year, the Planning Commission conducted a second workshop on this item. At that workshop, staff presented revised draft objective design standards requiring the use of craftsman-style design elements. Staff also presented possible locations where objective standards could be used. Staff discussed the need to revise the open space standards to be more flexible to recognize the needs of different housing types and populations. Next slide, please. More of an overview. The objective standards would be incorporated to the city's zoning ordinance. Would apply to new qualifying multifamily projects proposed within Cotati. And these standards have been shaped by the city's zoning ordinance, general plan, existing guidelines, and input from residents, local design and planning firms, and city staff. Next slide. So by law, Cotati must provide a by right residential development option. Applicants can still request different standards. If so, then the applicant must go through the Cotati's typical discretionary design review process. Next slide. The challenges with the process is that it does reduce decision maker discretion. There's no public input on development projects that meet all objective design and development standards. And establishing objective standards that are realistic, acceptable, effective, and fair is also a challenge. Next slide. So the way the process works, the ministerial by right review process is chosen by the applicant. If the developer applies for the ministerial review process, the project must comply with all the state requirements as well as all the Cotati adopted objective development standards and all their other standards included in the zoning code. Next slide. Go over the review process, how a city would review a process that comes in using these standards. The applicant does request the process and submits plans and a checklist. Staff does review the plans, submit to verify the project proposed meets all the state and city standards within a certain time limit. Staff approves the project without a public hearing. The applicant may then apply for a building permit, and generally public notification would be on the city's website, and a notice of project approval would be sent to the surrounding neighborhood. Next slide, please. So now I'll go over the proposed amendments included in the resolution, and most of these we saw at the second workshop. And these are basically the same ones you saw, except I'll talk more about the open space standards. But under neighborhood compatibility, it's orient buildings to the street. Street-facing parking is not permitted. Visible roads must be sloped with low to moderate pitch. If there's a third story, it must be set back 30 feet from any adjacent single-family properties. Next slide. Under building design, craftsman style is required. Four-sided architecture is required. If the building is facing a street, it needs the units on the ground floor would need front entry porches with a minimum size of 6 by 8 feet. Next slide. Under building design, continuing, eaves are required with a minimum width of 18 inches. Exposed roof beams or roof rafters are required. Windows shall be divided light with surrounds, and they can be double hung, single hung, or fixed. Next slide. Under building design, entry doors shall include recessed panels and/or glazing with a wood surround. For building materials, they need to choose two of the following at a minimum: solid or concrete-based wood siding, solid wood or concrete-based shingle siding, stucco, brick, stone. And materials such as T111 siding, particle board, vinyl, and EIFS are prohibited. Next slide. Under building design, blank walls, which is a wall with no window or door, shall be limited to 20 feet in length. And in those cases, the wall shall include art or be screened with landscaping. Next slide. Under massing and articulation, the building needs to include features such as balconies, bay windows, individualized entries that break up the building. There need to be offsets every 50 feet in the building with an offset of at least 18 inches. And also the roof line needs to vary every 50 feet, at least every 50 feet. Next slide. So these are the proposed open space standards. The previous meeting, we discussed the concept of providing usable open space and with various types of open space. At that time, staff did not have specific standards. So these are the proposed standards that are included in the ordinance before you. So under the proposal, each dwelling unit would need to have a minimum total of 150 square feet. So that's 150 square feet total of a combination of private and common open space. However, for projects next to a park, across the street or adjacent to a park, they only need 48 square feet of open space total. So there's three types of open space. One is private, and private open space that's specific to a unit, and that can be a private entry porch or private patio garden. So if you're on a ground floor unit, you need to include one of those with your project. And the other type of private open space is a private balcony, so that'd be for an upper floor unit, and private balconies are never required, so the ordinance does allow the applicant to choose it, but it's not a requirement for any of the units to include a balcony. Then for larger projects, these are projects of more than 10 units. They also need to provide some type of common open space, and this can be a courtyard or a veranda or rooftop deck. And so on the larger projects, one of these three things will need to be provided. Also in the larger projects, which is more than 10 units, you will need to provide additional amenities beyond what you've already provided. So those additional amenities you need to pick for a minimum of 3. So additional amenity could be a private balcony. They're not required, but you can choose that as one of your additional 3. or you can choose a playground, or if you provided a courtyard, you can also add a burn-up to that. And then if you want to add a community garden, so that would be a third additional amenity that you can add. So basically, so this list gives you choices that you can pick from. There's like I said, additional minimum of 3 additional, and that gives the developer options based upon the type of project they're building, who they're marketing the project to, who they're building it for. So some developers, if they're building family housing, may want to provide a playground. Another developer is targeting the project towards students or seniors, may instead have other types of things that geared towards those populations. So these are trying to provide a minimum standard, yet allow flexibility for the developer to make choices. And the last on the list is the project cannot include the removal of a native oak tree. Next slide. So these are just photos showing the examples of open space types that are allowed to be counted as usable open space. So the top left is a courtyard. The top right, that is a burn-up. And a burn-up is something fairly new to the United States, and that's basically a driveway that's upgraded to include special paving with no curbs and integrated landscape and seating, so it can be used by cars, pedestrians, bicyclists, and also can be used as a play court. And the bottom left is an example of a community garden. And to the right of that is an example of a court that's a bocce ball court that would be counted as open space. Next slide, please. At the top left example of a rooftop terrace that would be counted. To the right of that's a playground. Then below are 2 examples where open space, after if it's inside, would be counted as open space. It's part of a community facility, such as a community building that includes a fitness center or some kind of social area or lounge, that would be counted in your open space. Next slide. These are examples of private open space that would be counted. So on the top left, we have a balcony. To the right of that are outdoor patios. There's a patio for each unit. And then at the bottom is an example of a front porch that's for that unit specifically. That would also be counted as private open space. Next slide, please. Also before you, what's proposed, this is table 4.3 from our existing zoning code, the multifamily section. And currently we do have standards for open space for multifamily, and staff started using this to develop the standards before you, and staff was having issues with the way this table is laid out. It also has quite a few blanks, such as over in the right-hand column, it talks about private open space, but most of these are left blank, except for the 5 to 10 units, has 150 square feet for each unit, and the rest of the sections are left blank. So there's been some interpretations on how to use this over the years, and so rather than using this table in the existing code, staff's proposing to replace this table with basically to mimic the objective design standards, as we just talked about. So that's also part of this proposal, is to replace this section of the code with the new standards that we just discussed. Next slide, please. These are the additional amendments that are proposed, and these are basically the same as you've seen at the previous workshops. Outdoor lighting is required along walkways and driveways. Regarding site design, streets are required to be extended if they're shown on adopted plans. Open space should be looked over by dwellings to provide defensible space. Garages and carports shall include architectural elements of the main building. Parking shall be screened, and to restore historic buildings as a part of the project. Next slide. Regarding accessory elements, these are similar to what you've seen before. Screen roof equipment and trash containers, provide dumpsters for 5 or more units, include outside storage for each unit, provide laundry facilities in each unit, and for mixed use, provide pedestrian connections between all uses. Next slide. We'll move on to the telecommunication and small cell design guidelines. And these are guidelines, are not requirements, they are the city's preferences. And the intent is to minimize the visual impacts of these facilities consistent with state and federal law. These facilities may be located on private property, public property, or located within the public right-of-way. Next slide. Regarding guidelines for standard for facilities located on private and public property, these are outside the public right-of-way, is to locate the facility to minimize impact of scenic qualities, blend into surrounding environment by integrating into common site features. So if you look at the examples to the right, the tower is showing a facility that is not screened, it's not integrated. And to the right, we show examples of how these facilities can be integrated into common facilities such as steeples, religious symbols at churches, and within artwork. Also, these can be screened with vegetation, if that's possible, or minimize the appearance with vegetation. And any kind of equipment, fencing around the equipment should be integrated with surrounding buildings. Next slide. Regarding telecommunications and small cells that are in the public right-of-way, typically these are going to be on wooden, in Cotati would be on wooden PG&E poles. And the goal is to not locate these facilities directly in front of our residents or other habitable building. Keep them away from street corners by at least 50 feet. Where possible, screen with vegetation. Equipment on the pole should be neutral in color or match the color of the pole. So in the examples to the right, you see a facility where they are located near the ground. They do not match the color of the pole. An example to the right is a better example on a wooden pole where the facilities are actually higher up out of view of pedestrians and public driving by. And the equipment matches the color of the pole. Next slide, please. And these are examples of facilities on street lights. So the goal is that the antenna and equipment should be flush with the pole and incorporate a stealth design. So the example at the top shows a street light where the equipment matches the color of the pole, and it's designed to incorporate a design of the pole. Then the example at the bottom, it would be an example that doesn't meet the standards because it's basically equipment that's just tacked onto the pole and is not designed to integrate with the pole or be of a stealth design. Next slide. This is to do with ground-mounted equipment, which these facilities often include, and the ground-mounted equipment should be located behind the sidewalk and screened or underground. And when these boxes are visible, the utility should participate in the utility box public art project. Next slide. So this is at the end of the presentation, so this is staff's recommendation. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission conduct a public hearing and adopt resolutions recommending that the City Council amend the Land Use Code to adopt multifamily objective design standards, amend the open space standards for multifamily housing projects, and adopt a resolution recommending that the City Council adopt telecommunication and small cell design guidelines. Next slide. And that concludes staff's presentation. Any questions of staff at this time?
I have a question of commissioners and of staff. Was anyone wanting a 5-minute break before we continue on, or should we continue on? I meant to stop before and ask that question in between presentations, and I failed to do that. What is the feeling of commissioners and staff about taking a 5-minute break?
It's
I'd
fine.
rather just keep going.
I can keep going too.
Okay, me too. Okay, so then we'll go to questions. Commissioner Rodriguez, any questions?
I don't really have any questions, just a comment that, that these standard designs are very important, especially with SB 35. At least we have some control about how the design will look and incorporate into the way Cotati feels and looks like. So, that's all my comments.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Moore?
So I just had one thing, in the beginning of your presentation, you put increased clarity for neighbors. If this is all ministerial, they don't get a notice until they break ground. So just that increased clarity for neighbors, I don't think they're gonna have a whole lot of increased clarity on this since they don't have any say. I do feel like I'm just gonna say, the first project we do this that goes across the table and does not get vetted out by the public, should be an interesting process for us as planning commissioners and for our fellow council members. So I know that this is something we need to put in play, but I just want to publicly encourage neighbors that know where you live. And if you have an empty site next to you, know what's going to be happening on that site, because or what they can do on the site. So I'd hate to have somebody come to me after the fact and say, I didn't know that you were putting this ordinance in, or this resolution. So those are my only comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Moore. And my questions are, we submitted this objective design standards proposal to about 4 or 5 different companies, and we only got response from one of them. And so I noticed some of the responses that they were giving where that it's not possible or practical requirement for multifamily dwellings for some of the things that we were trying to put in place. So I'm wondering if that's a standard, if the response is kind of a standard, or was that just their opinion on our objective design standards? That's what I was kind of wondering about, the feedback that we got from the one person, the one company that gave us feedback.
Right. What I was getting from most of the comments that we got from the one developer, I think generally was feeling that a lot of these requirements increase the cost of construction, which is correct, and that this is the balancing act we talked about at the workshop, is to come up with standards that reflect the community's expectations of the community. It does require a better design. And so some developers who want to save time will look at the standards and say, yes, we will save time, we will go with the standards. And other developers may feel that these things are increasing the construction costs, and they likely are. So that's the balancing act, is coming up with standards that developers, they can do both. However, a developer can choose, if they feel these standards aren't going to work for their project, they can choose the more typical route, the traditional route, going through the discretionary process. So they do still have that choice.
Okay, thank you very much for the response. And now we want to go to the public for any questions or comments from the public.
Looking to our public for any comments, please use your raise hand icon. And that will end public comment.
Okay, thank you so much. Is there any final comments from the commissioners? Commissioner Rodriguez, do you have any final comments before we go to motions?
Just one question, I'm sorry. For the telecommunication boxes, there was an earlier picture with that it was decorated and painted, and depending on the width of the sidewalk, is there a way to orient them in a way that doesn't restrict the sidewalk even more, make it more narrow?
Yeah, they would not be able to locate a box that's going to be restricting the sidewalk.
Okay.
They would not be able to narrow a sidewalk by putting in a box. That would not be possible.
All right. That was my own question.
Thank you. Any final comments or questions from Commissioner Moore?
No, I don't have any. Thank you.
Now, question for staff: is this one motion, or is it 3 different? Because I saw that there was adopt, amend, and establish. So is it just one, or is it 3 or 4 motions?
It is. Let me clarify. It is. I believe it is 2. There were 2 resolutions, so it is 2 motions. one motion's is for the objective standards, and the other motion is for the design guidelines for the telecommunication.
Okay. So then it starts with the design standards. Okay, so it looks like staff already has it up on the view. So does someone want to make a motion for the first one?
Oh, I'll make a
I'll
motion.
make a motion.
Oh, go ahead, Jonathan, you go.
Sure. Resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Cotati recommending that the City Council adopt amendments to Title 17, Land Use of the Cotati Municipal Code to establish objective design standards for streamlined ministerial multifamily residential development by adding Chapter 17.39, Objective Design Standard, I think that's it.
I think part of it got cut off there. So
Maybe you could tell us which page to go to. We can go to that page.
Page 3 of 3, that's what I had I just used my regular one for the beginning of the meeting. I used my minutes, the meeting minutes.
Oh, the meeting agenda?
Meeting agenda, yes, sorry. That's what I was using.
By adding Chapter 17.39, Objective Design Standards for Streamlined and Ministerial Residential Projects, and amending Section 17.42.120, Multifamily and Small Lot Single-Family Projects, and 17.90, Definitions.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Let's go to roll call.
Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
Commissioner Rodriguez,
Yes.
Vice Chair Lemus.
Yes. Thank you. And then we'll go to the second resolution. Does someone want to make a motion for the second resolution?
I'll make a motion. A resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Cotati recommending that the City Council adopt the draft document titled Guidelines for the Design of Telecommunications Facilities and Personal Wireless Service Facilities, small cells, located on private and public property and located within the public right-of-way.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Let's go to a roll call, please.
Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
Commissioner Rodriguez,
Yes.
Vice Chair Lemus.
Yes. Thank you. So I think it was those two resolutions, and then we'll go to reports by staff.
Thank you, Vice Chair Lemus and Commissioners. Just briefly, I just want to identify that the housing element RFP is out and it's available on the website. Staff sent the RFP to over 80 firms with expertise in long-range planning and housing policy. And we tried to coordinate with the ABAG bench staff. So ABAG and MTC has hired kind of a group of consultants with the goal to kind of streamline getting these housing element updates completed, and with the idea that some jurisdictions could kind of work together and share resources to try to reduce the cost, because there's a lot of basically a big need with a limited amount of consultants. So they were trying to do what they could to try to get in front of that, and we followed their lead by trying to reach out to those folks who we knew were on their bench, and then some other firms who we knew had done quality work in Cotati and Sonoma County. But so just know that that RFP is out. We do hope to bring a contract to the City Council in August to get a consultant underway to start that process. As we've talked about, we need to get that housing element update in place by January 1st, 2023. That's approved by Housing and Community Development at the state level, so it's going to be quite a lift. But to Commissioner Moore's point, I think that'll be a great opportunity for us to really try to educate the community on some of the recent changes in state law, and also look at some of the housing opportunity sites, because we will need to update some of those. And we can talk to those surrounding neighbors and let them know kind of what it means to be located next to either a housing opportunity site or a site that's zoned a certain way residentially. Because I think that's a good point, and we need to do our best to make sure everyone really understands what the law now says. As the commission's aware, we canceled the July 5th meeting. We're also going to cancel July 19th, so you all have July off. And we're going to do our best to do what we can to really give you that heads up as much as possible when we know we're going to have a meeting or we know we're going to cancel it. We're going to start to put together kind of a tentative agenda that looks out into the future. And so just know that that's coming, but tonight's the first step with that, and no meetings in July. And that being said, we're likely to have a meeting on August 2nd. And there is a good chance that will be our first hybrid meeting where we're actually have the chance for folks to be in the chamber meeting in person. The format will still be hybrid, so folks who need to or want to can still participate via Zoom, both public and commissioners. But we're looking at that as a possibility. It is not confirmed yet, but just know that would be the first meeting if it was to occur. And that's all I have for tonight. Just want to thank you all. It was a big agenda, and I'm sorry we weren't able to get it out to you a little sooner. We were trying to get these out, and they're big with as much lead time as possible, but you all came with great questions and very prepared, and staff really appreciates it.
Thank you. Is there any reports by the commissioners?
I don't have any.
Neither do I.
Okay, and neither do I. Okay, and items received after the agenda was posted. We did receive 2 items which we reviewed, and I think the commissioners also reviewed. One was a letter by a neighbor of the Charles Street project, and the other one was about the drought efforts and the Plaza View project and what kind of efforts are being done to conserve water. So we did receive the comments. Was there any other items received?
Nothing further.
Nothing further. Okay. Okay, so if that is all, I think that we can adjourn, correct? Okay, so we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Okay, good night.
Good night.